Hey, BassGeek here, and today we're continuing the ledge bait breakdown with what I consider a finesse bait on the ledges, the MAG Neko Rig. Alright guys, so we've already covered the scrounger head, and we've covered the swing head and how I set up and when and where I use those. Now we're going to cover, and I know I said it's kind of a finesse rig, but it really is not. But I will tell you this is probably become one of my go-to setups, and it's the MAG Neko Rig. Guys, when I say Magnum, generally I'm using some pretty big worms on this setup. Now there's one flaw with the setup I'm going to show you tonight, and for some reason I've lost my stupid O-ring tool and can't find it, so I'm going to have to run out and pick me one of those up before I finally do get out on the water. Like I said, for everyone that don't know, work is weighing me down. I'm working 65 hours one week, 75 to 80 hours the next week. So right now we're going to be doing a lot of talking about baits. You're not going to get to see me out on the water. Trust me, nobody wants to be out on the water this time of year more than me. So bear with me. Hopefully I can show you some baits and some techniques that you haven't tried, like this one. Because this right here, when the bite is tough, man, this is one of my favorite setups to put some big bass. Now, I'm not talking about throwing a little drop shot down there on a school on a ledge and culling through 30 or 40. This is going to pick off those big bass when the bite's tough. So let's start right off with the actual rod and reel setup. Now, you'll know I'm a Lews guy, and one of the things that I absolutely love is the LFS reel. I couple that with, and guys, by the way, again, protect your investment. You can see I got this one personalized. These are TRC rod covers. What I love is the tip, and you can see it takes a lot of pressure for this to come off. All right. So again, the reel is just an LFS, but it is a high speed. So now this is where, when we were talking about the swing head, I said I like that low speed because I like to slow down and make sure that that bait's continuously on the bottom. Well, this bait I'm going to use, and I'm going to move with my rod tip. So I'm not going to move it with my reel. So I want a high speed reel. So when I take it, you've got a ton of line out there. You're making long casts on these ledges and out here on this deep water. So, you're making a long cast, and then on top of that, the bait has to drop, 15, 20, 30, 40, 60 feet at times. So you've got a lot of line out. So that means you've got to take a lot of line up. You got to catch up with that fish once you set that hook and you turn his head. That takes me to the reel speed, and this is a 7.5 to 1, if I do remember correctly. It is. So a 7.5 to 1. Now, the line that I'm going to couple that with, of course, it's going to be fluorocarbon. Again, I tell you guys, you can use braid, but my opinion is I'm dragging this a long way. I'm dragging it through the school. I want it to be as stealthy as I can be, even though that braid, or even though that fluorocarbon is going to be 15-pound test. I'll go down to 12 at times, but 15-pound test is generally my go-to when I'm out there on those ledges. Now, the rod itself, again, 7'3". You can get away with a 7 foot, of course, but to me, 7'3" is the shortest rod you want. I like to push that 7'6" to, 7'8" or 7'10". I mean, to me, when I set that hook, I've got to really pull up a lot of line. So I want to take that line up, get that hook, put it home, and be able to crank that fish in when I need it. So let's talk about the baits themselves. What baits do I use? Generally, I use 2 different brands of baits, and I'm not sponsored by either one of these, but I like the Zoom Magnum Trick Worm. That's an 8-inch bait, and then I like the Strike King bullworm for my 10-inch bait. Now, let's talk about the colors that I'm generally going to go to. 3 colors right off the bat that I'm going to use. It's going to be, of course, my green pumpkin. It's going to be my watermelon red, which is generally my go-to color. It's what I'm going to start with. And the next color is going to be this color right here, which I can't even find the pack of. And this is my red bug color. As it starts getting hot, the red bug really comes into play. This is kind of a later in the season color. Generally, I'm going to start with that watermelon red, that green pumpkin and clear water. Some of the bait colors that I'm going to go to as alternatives, especially early in the year. You know, if maybe there's some bluegills out there already, or I see them, you know, see them spitting up bluegills, or sometimes out there on those ledges you'll see a bluegill kind of just floating. I'm going to go with a watermelon candy color. I'm going to go with a sungill color. Now, just some off the wall colors that work, one when they're feeding on shad. The other, I mean, guys, I don't know why it works. It's Killer Dawn, and it's kind of a, you know, kind of that purple, you know, morning dawn color. And the other I like really early in the season when they're really keying on shad, and that is the electric shad from Zoom. That is a kick color right there. So when it comes to colors, if you're first starting out with this rig, you know, keep it pretty simple. Start out with that watermelon red, you know, that green pumpkin black flake, you know, plum, red bug. Those are kind of the 4 colors that I really keep laying out on the deck of the boat, and I'll kind of rotate through those. Now, watermelon candy I'll throw around. Sometimes they just want that color on some of the lakes that I fish. Now, let's talk about how I rig this setup. The weights that I really like to use, because they're heavy, these go up to a 1/4 ounce. These are the Voss twist in weights. Now you can use a nail weight, but you know, generally I'm fishing this around some banks that have a little bit of rock on them, so I want to feel that. And that little head, much like a shaky head, is going to translate that. Even though it's just lead, I'm going to get a little more translation of what's down there than I would if I buried a nail weight up into the bait. Now, let's say you're fishing real deep and you can't find any other weights. Well, what you can do is you can pick these nail weights up, go ahead and shove it. You know, I could probably fit about 2 nail weights up in this section of this bait and still put me a head on there and twist up. So I can really weight the bottom half of this worm down, and it's not going to get in the way of my hook or my hook set. You know, the tail is where all the action is going to be. I don't know that I'd recommend that much weight. I mean, you better really be fishing deep if you're putting 2 nail weights and a 1/4 ounce head on there. But sometimes these lead heads, I'll cut them in half and just shove a smaller piece just far enough up in there to put that nail, or to put that head up in. And the thing about these heads, like I said, they are literally just twist in heads. So they just twist up into the bait. Now, something, I've got this rigged up, and I will tell you, you need to use an O-ring. You'll tear these worms up just casting them. I don't have it rigged with an O-ring right now because for some reason I've managed to lose my O-ring tool. And I just discovered this. So I'm going to have to go out and buy a new O-ring tool. But like I said, put you an O-ring on here, and for you guys that don't know, it's a Wacky rig tool. There's a ton of videos out there on how to use them. A lot of guys use them with Senkos when they're just fishing weightless Wacky rigs. Go search the YouTubeage world and you'll find 100 different versions of what a Wacky rig tool is and how to use it out there. I might do a quick tips on it one day when I actually go buy one. The other thing is, so this hook is a Wacky, this is a Trocar Wacky worm hook. This is a 2/0 hook, okay? Now guys, I'm telling you, this Trocar it's a pretty heavy wire. So if you lean back into them, the likelihood of you bending this hook out is low to none. So the one thing you always want to do, O-ring or not, rig that hook tip up. So when those fish grab it, you're setting that hook into the head. That is a 2/0 hook. Now you can use any kind of really wacky rig hook that you like. Again, I'm not sponsored by Trocar. I've got Trocar, I've got Mustad, I've got Gamakatsus. I mean, you name it. I've probably got a circle hook by about anybody owner that makes a circle hook or a wacky rig hook. So all that being said, whatever your favorite is, rig it. Now, if there's a lot of brush down there, now you're not gonna want to fish this around heavy brush. But if there's some stumps and you're getting hung up, they do make a weedless version. This will help keep you from getting hung up. So cut that off, cut the open hook off. I like to fish an open hook as much as I can, just increases the hook up. But if you are getting hung up a lot, go ahead and put that weedless version on there. It's not going to reduce the hookup ratio. You know, if it's less than 1%, I'd be surprised. Guys, a lot of this stuff that you're seeing, you can actually go to Tackle Freaks. There is links in the bottom, in the description. If you don't mind, follow those links. It helps the channel out. You know, it helps me buy more of this stuff. It helps me, just basically keep the channel running, put gas in the tank, buy new equipment, and that sort of deal, so that I can bring this stuff to you guys and let you know what I like to use. All this stuff costs a lot of money. So where are you going to fish this? Well, we're talking ledges, so I mean, it's kind of obvious. The only place that I would tell you not to fish this, and again, when I talk about ledge fishing, I'm not really necessarily talking about going out and fishing creek channel ledges. There's a lot of lakes that I fish deep that I'm fishing humps, I'm fishing points. So I like to call it deep fishing more than I like to call it ledge fishing. That's a more accurate statement. And there's a lot of times I will fish a ledge, but it will be very close to the bank, maybe in the creek channel or whatever. So it's really deep fishing. And that's where this bait is really going to shine. You're going to get out there in that 20, 25, like I said, 30, 35 foot of water generally during the summer, sometimes 40 and 60 feet of water. And this is where you're going to put this bait at. Now, you're not, like I said earlier, you're not going to fish it through brush piles. If you are brush pile fishing, this is not the bait that you want to fish. I will tell you, it does act like a heavy wacky rig, so you can actually maybe swim it across the brush piles, but I would think there'd be much more efficient ways of fishing like a good old-fashioned Texas rig. This is out there for those humps and those points that go from that mud, clay, combination of sand, pebble banks to the rock banks. And those are the places I'm going to fish. Those points that's got a rock seam, those points that's got some sort of rock or, a shell bed or, that sort of stuff. Your typical summertime deep water locales. Now, let's talk about retrieves. So retrieves are actually very simple. You're really going to have 2 retrieves. So the 2 retrieves that I generally go with, I'm going to cast it out and I'm just barely going to move it, dragging it along the bottom, letting that tail just barely twitch as it comes. Now, the other retrieve is kind of like stroking a jig or fishing a wacky rig. So I might drag it just a little bit and then I may just pop it up. Now again, you're going to pop the slack in your line. You don't want to move that bait too far. If you tighten up and you pop up, you're going to move that bait a long way. So you're going to drop your rod, have a nice little bow, and you're just going to move your rod tip just a few inches, 3 inches each pop. It's going to be took, took, and that's it. You're going to follow that bait back down, reel the slack up, and trust me, if they're on that sort of bite, you will know They'll set the hook for you 90% of the time. They'll reach out, they'll grab it, they'll turn away to get away from that. Well, they'll turn away or they'll run right at you, which is where the high-speed reel and the long rod comes into play. This can be such a deadly, deadly presentation out on the ledges. It's a slow presentation, but it's a presentation that with that tail sticking up in the air, it has just got some killer drawing power to it. Make sure you get out there and give it a try. As always, questions and comments in the comment section below. You know I love to talk about fishing with you guys. So ask me some questions. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell so you know these notifications are coming out. And you guys rock.